Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and welcome to the Friday Conversation. Very excited to be here with some of my favorite people. Always great to chat with all of you. So, Tim, will you start us off with an introduction, please, sir?
Yeah, sure. I'm Tim Hardie. I'm a UK-based author. Probably best known for writing Hall of Bones, which was a Spiffbo finalist entry a couple of years ago. And yeah, sort of got roped into broadening my palette, I think, which is kind of why we're here tonight, really. So yeah, got involved in the Anatomy of Fear as one of my first anthology project, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I want to learn more about that. And Holly.
I'm Holly Tinsley. I am the author of the Vanguard Chronicles. We Men of Ash and Shadow was an SBFBO 7 finalist, same year as Tim. I also have a second book in the series out, The Hand That Cast the Bone, and I'm currently working on a standalone, which hopefully will be out in early next year. I'm just mentioning that now because I've been working on it all day today, so currently on a writing high. And yeah, I was involved in the Anatomy of Fear, which we'll talk a little bit about throughout this session.
And Zamil.
I'm Zamil Akhtar. I'm based in Dubai, and I'm the author of Gunmetal Gods Saga and Lightblade. Anatomy of Fear is my first anthology, but I had so much fun with it, so it'll probably not be my last.
Oh, wow. Before we get into the Anatomy of Fear, and I want to learn all about that, I was curious, Holly, when you get on a riding high, is it hard to stop? When you get that, just like you get a runner's high, is it kind of the same thing? They get like the endorphins flowing?
I mean, I haven't actually had one for about 6 months, so I'm going to try and write this one for as long as I can and hopefully get a book out. It's a lot of fun because I think when you get in the zone, and especially when I'm at the end of the production now, so we're doing things like the cover and the blurb and kind of putting it all together, and you start seeing it as a finished product, it kind of reinvigorates you. You know, you get the excitement with the first draft of the new story, but then I'm sure the others will agree, you go through the editing process, and after a while you just think, I don't want to look at this anymore. But then when you actually get to this stage, it becomes exciting again. So that's currently where I'm at.
I would imagine that's when you catch that lightning in a bottle, it's good to milk it for as long as you can.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm 100% driving my family crazy at the moment, and I will probably be awake until quite early in the early hours of the morning today, just tweaking the cover and changing colours and things like that. But yeah, it's just what you do.
No big deal. Just writing a book, no big deal.
It's just part of it, the antisocial hours of an author.
So the Anatomy of Fear, where did it start? What was the spark that started the whole idea?
Well, I mean, he's probably fed up of me saying this, but it actually all started with P.L. Stewart, the author of The Drowned Kingdom, who I know that you know. He came to me at some point. I don't even know why this conversation happened, but he had this idea. He said, wouldn't it be cool if we did an anthology? We both know a lot of really good authors. We both like different styles. We kind of have some good contacts. Let's see if we can put something together. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then we kind of went out to a list of authors we wanted to get involved, not really thinking that we would get immediate responses or that there would be a bit of back and forth. We emailed 12 authors and all 12 of them came back and said, yeah, we're on board. When are we starting? Let's get this thing going. And we kind of thought, oh, right, okay, we've actually got to do it now. So yeah, that's kind of where it started from. And then we just really ran with it.
Wow. So for Tim and Zamil, do these happen often? Do you get offers or do you get ideas like this pitched to you often?
No, this was the first time anyone had ever invited me to an anthology. And I love horror, so for me it was just an immediate yes. I think the challenging part was the theme, like you have to pick a body part. So it took me a long time to pick one, but other than that, I was very happy, like very excited.
Nice.
Yeah, it was the same for me. First time doing anything collaborative like this. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I decided to do it, because it's writing is obviously by definition a bit of a lonely sole profession normally. So it's a very different dynamic when you're working with 12 other people, and that was I found that really quite a really encouraging bit of the process actually, because everyone sort of encouraged each other. We all kind of formed sort of small beta teams of about groups of 4. So we were all reading each other's stories quite early on as well, which I think it just helps improve it. So I like the collaborative side, and it was one of those things that when you get invited to do something like this, you really got to say yes, haven't you? And it felt like a no-brainer really. But it was a really, that early stage in particular was a really rewarding, like, creative experience for me, I think.
I would imagine it'd be hard to say no to a bunch of people that you respect and admire to invite you to something and you pass on it. I think that'd be tough to not be involved as they're moving forward and having a good time with it.
Yeah, definitely. The reason you'd say no is imposter syndrome, and I fight that monster. We all do, don't we, every single day. So I think I've always tried to take the view that if an opportunity comes along, you've got to have a really good reason for saying no to that, and thinking you're not good enough or it's not for you is not a good reason. You've got to push yourself with this stuff. So it was a no-brainer, but you've still got to make sure you actually click yes rather than no at the final moment.
Can I just add to that as well that Tim has actually been part of my feedback group for my own writing for quite a while now. So he obviously knows me quite well. So really, in his case, there really wasn't an option to say no, because I probably would have forced him to, hunted him down and made him do it.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. I feel quite afraid when you put it like that. But I was delighted to come on board, and Holly gave me no choice whatsoever.
Yeah. When it was decided that everyone would pick a body part, did anyone pick the same body part? And if so, how did you decide who took that body part?
I think there was a few. I think that Lee C. Connolly, he had a choice of about 3 different body parts that he was willing to work with. And I think one of the other authors decided that they would prefer one of those. So, and it was all very polite. There was a lot of negotiation, and it's like, well, if you take my leg, I'll take your elbow, that kind of thing. But I mean, I think everyone made their choices pretty quickly from what I remember.
I actually originally picked hand, and I wrote like half a story with hand, and then I had like a much better idea for skin. So I went around on the group that we had asking if like anyone had chosen skin, and luckily enough, no one had chosen it yet. So I switched from hand to skin.
I didn't know you'd done that actually. It was quite because for me again, as you go through the process of sort of editing and beta reading these things and so on, everyone's story becomes really, really distinct. So like the hand body part, that ended up going to Bjorn Larsen in the end, and he's written a really sort of distinctive tale taking that body part, which obviously wouldn't have happened if Zamil had stuck with the hand. So it's really interesting to think about what might have been as well if we'd sort of gone the other way. I really wrestled with my body part. I got ears, and I was a little bit late to the party. Everyone, Holly's saying it was very polite. It was all very polite, but I was number 12 to pick, and sort of like sifting through body parts, trying to choose one that's actually left that you feel like there might be some creative spark. And I narrowed it down to I did have this. I thought, could I go comedy horror and do dandruff as being my body part, so you'd have like the creeping terror of it sort of like coming out your scalp or whatever, but I didn't think I could probably make that idea fly as my first ever foray into horror, so I went with ears in the end, which I still struggled with until I flipped that to sound. So I sort of played a bit with the idea to kind of come up with where the horror element of that actually came in. But yeah, it was pretty. There's a lot of body parts when you start dividing up amongst 12 people, which is a good thing. Yeah, I think everyone felt they had something they could work with, and that gave them the good ideas, and they were able to run with it. Like Zamil says, if it wasn't quite going right, you could there was plenty of room at the beginning to sort of change things around and find a different way into it.
What was the strangest body part someone picked?
well, probably dandruff was, which no one ever fought me for. But I'm trying to think what else there
I
was.
thought toes was quite an outside choice. Like the B.A. Bellick did toes, and it completely made sense when you read the story. But at the time, I was thinking, it's like, well, how is he going to make toes scary? But he worked his magic on it, and he managed it. So I'm very impressed with that.
Oh, did you have a list of available body parts? Or did you just pick whatever part you want and it'll be off the list?
Total free for all.
Trying not to make it sound weird, but yes, that's basically what happened.
I think we're past that. But so the idea was decided, and you all decided to move forward, and it's great that you use Kickstarter to help fund the project, and there's a lot involved in an anthology. So what was that experience like to put it on Kickstarter?
I mean, my part of it was really at the beginning, kind of putting it all together. Tim and Jacob had the honour and the pleasure of doing most of the heavy lifting towards the end, which I'm very grateful for. But it was a really interesting experience. I'd never done or considered doing a Kickstarter before, so lots of people pitched in, even from outside the author group. So I had people who had previously done successful Kickstarters who were kind of giving advice and guidance, and it was, I mean, for the first few weeks that it was running, it was like a full-time job to make sure things were getting updated and that we were keeping on top of the budgets and the rewards that we wanted to get out. It was, I mean, it's a lot of work. It was a lot more than I initially anticipated, but well worth doing.
I think the promo side of it's the bit that when you launch your book on your own, it's a very different process. But with Kickstarter, it kind of gives you that natural buzz, and you're right. It's almost like a runaway train in some ways, because you're as you sort of hit your goals and start to think about stretch goals and things. I must admit, I wasn't necessarily expecting, with this being our first sort of thing, that we get that far into it, and all of a sudden, you're having to be quite creative, but also still retain budgetary control at the same time, which is kind of where I was kind of given the job of actually managing the finances for the project. So sort of like thinking, is that okay? Can we do that? Having to do a lot of maths, so it's all very creative, and at the same time there's kind of like a business angle that comes in as well. So you don't want to sort of like not ride that positive wave, but also you don't want to commit to stuff you can't deliver. So it's quite a weird mix of creativity and business, actually. Enjoyed doing it, but I was really glad Holly was leading that earlier stage, because it was a bit of a roller coaster, wasn't it?
Oh, 100%. It's like 3 months of my life, just I don't know where they went.
A lot of work, and I saw the announcement. I couldn't click fast enough, so it was. How can you say no to such a great lineup of authors? I'm keeping my eyes on Zamil's collector's edition too. I'm watching every day.
Yeah, that's I know what they mean about Kickstarter feeling like a full-time job, because these things are a lot of work, but it opens you up to a whole new audience. Like there's a Kindle audience, and there's also a separate Kickstarter audience. So I think for all indies going forward, Kickstarter should sort of be in their line of sight as an option, because it is a whole new audience, and it's like you're diversifying away from just Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And not only having all of you feed off each other creatively, but also if someone is a fan of Tim's, and they read the book and they say, "Oh, who is H.L. Tinsley?" And like, "Wow, this is a great story. I'm going to check out other things that this person's done." So it's a chance to widen your audience too, and the whole experience.
Yeah, I think as well it's great for the authors in terms of moving into genres that they'd maybe be interested in exploring later, and kind of taking that existing audience with them and trying something new and giving them like a taste of, you know, a different world or a different genre, and then seeing how that kind of plays out with that audience as well. So it's growing new audience, but it's also helping to kind of stretch out the audience that's already there, if that makes sense.
Were all of you surprised at the response
I mean,
on the Kickstarter?
I don't know whether I was or not, because I think I had a lot of faith in the lineup of authors. I mean, we straight away we were going for some, you know, from my point of view, really heavy hitters. I mean, there was a couple of people that we got on board that, you know, I was physically shaking when I sent the email to ask them if they wanted to get on board with the project. So I was like, they're going to be too busy and they're not going to know who I am, and it's just. So I think I knew that there was pulling power just from the fact that we'd got so many, you know, really high quality authors. I think I was more worried about my ability to market it and promote it the right way. That was where my real fear came in.
Yeah, it was kind of just a journey into the unknown in many respects for me. You know, first anthology, first Kickstarter as well, and no experience of this whatsoever. So, yeah, knowing what to expect. I think, yeah, I a bit like Holly. I had really I had confidence in the lineup. I had confidence in the sort of product, and what we were producing was good. But yeah, sort of like getting a bunch of, you know, basically straight. I know selling books, you're selling books to strangers, aren't you? That is the whole business model, and I need to remember that. But it's sort of a bit more public when you're being publicly supported that way. You know, I suppose it did feel like a bit of a risk, but then you sort of that initial response was really strong. And I thought, although it's sort of like the classic Kickstarter of big response, tailed off in the middle, then rocketed back up again towards the end. Yeah, but once we got through that first goal, that first target, I knew we were on to a winner, because then the numbers just kept sort of scrolling around it. Well, that bit was great. As the finance guru, that bit was great.
And I was curious about the physical rewards when you have a physical, like a tier that has physical books that you send out to people. Does someone from the team have to do that, or just what role does Kickstarter play in all that, or is it all up to you to get all that done?
It depends a bit on your model again and how you're doing it. So I think some people, when they'll do a Kickstarter, that they'll cost it having a company do that, do the delivery of every, you know, things for fulfillment basically for you, both electronic and physical stuff. We chose not to do that, and I'm still not entirely sure whether it was a wise decision to make, but we did it that way. So yeah, we basically took that on as part of the team effort. So I did the digital rewards and sent them out and sort of contact people that way, again through Kickstarter basically. And then Jacob Sanix was responsible for, I mean, it sounds so glamorous, doesn't it, but he basically went to a bargain booze outlet in his hometown and shipped these books out in sort of batches of 10 to 20. And I don't think he dares to show his face in the local post office at the moment, because he had this angry queue of British people love to queue, and but we don't like to queue for hours while somebody is posting parcel after parcel after parcel to far-flung places of the world. And that was the other bit that was quite challenging. Was I suppose I expected it to be the US market, to be big in Britain, but actually we got people from all around the world back in this project. So yeah, having to send stuff to some very far-flung, weird and wonderful places around the globe, and your local post office isn't really geared up for that. So I think it worked perfectly well, but I can also see why some people go with a company to fulfil those kind of elements, so that you can do it through, going to a publishing house and getting them to sort of basically package, produce, and ship that book out for you, which comes with its own costs. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's creative and it's fun, but it's also business all mixed together in this quite sort of like frantic cocktail. So I mean, I think I had the easy job, honestly. Jacob at the end sending those books out to everybody, and they're all shipped. So everyone that's backed it and everyone that's funded us, all the rewards are out there. All the physical rewards are winging their way around the world, and it's really fun actually, because they're sort of landing now in sort of every sort of day or so you're seeing something new. But it's sort of, obviously the further it's got to go, the longer it's going to take. So for some people, we're probably going to see things land over the next couple of weeks, I should think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm checking my mailbox.
Yeah, it's coming. Honestly, I've seen it. I've signed off the receipt.
No,
I know it's gone.
I'm ready to dig into it when I get my hands on it. But yeah, it's great. I would imagine shipping costs are really expensive, though.
Yes. I mean, not so shipping to UK and stuff. Not a big, not great jakes, but yeah, going further afield, that cost obviously goes up. So it's one of the reasons why you have to ship and accept that things can't necessarily ship quickly. I mean, I could get, I could have got it to you tomorrow, Steve, if I really wanted to, but you'd have had to have paid me like £100 for the book. So it's about that balance in what people are prepared to pay, the sort of being, are they prepared to wait, I suppose, as well. So there was a hugely complicated spreadsheet that you pulled together, didn't you, Holly, with a calculator of what our shipping costs ultimately would be. There's the fun stuff people want to tune in to listen to on this podcast, I'm absolutely sure, but this huge spreadsheet with all these different destinations and what the shipping costs would be for that one, and trying to come up with, basically Kickstarter enables you to sort of price according to the destination. So it's cheaper to back it in the UK, because it's easier for us to ship from there than it would be to say go to Australia, for example, where we've got some backers. So it did some of those calculations for you.
Yeah, I think getting it to me, getting it to me the next day would be like a kidney or something we'd have to give up. It'd be pretty expensive.
Yeah. So we want people to be keen. Don't get me wrong, but there's a limit. We don't expect too much from our fans.
No, I think most people who back a project on Kickstarter or something like this, they're patient, because even though it takes time, it takes time to get it all together, to fund it, and then to organize it. So I think most people are understanding with all that stuff, I would imagine.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. So for the cover, I love the cover. The cover was great. How did that come together?
That was really straightforward.
It was,
wasn't it, Holly?
it was really straightforward. There were
all.
no delays or issues at all on it. It was probably the most challenging element of the whole project. I think we initially found an artist. They started working on it. Really great person. Unfortunately, for their own reasons, weren't able to continue. So we thought, okay, we'll get someone else. And I think by the time we got to about the fifth artist that we'd started working with, we were really starting to panic. We were at the stage of thinking that Tim was going to have to draw this cover for us. Fortunately we didn't have to go down that route. We found an artist called Dawn Larder, who is actually, funnily enough, doing my next cover for me now. So that's quite cool, because we're going to carry on working together. But she agreed to come on board with the project, and we gave her a brief for the cover and kind of what we wanted from the illustrations. All of the individual authors gave a kind of rough brief and some keywords as to what they wanted for their own pictures, because everyone got their own individual one. And she was just great to work with from start to finish. I mean, she was so quick and on board and responsive. I think it was fate in the end that we found her.
Yeah, well, the two of us, Holly, I've spoken to you about this, but we've just started looking into an anthology for our community forums, and I hadn't even started any work on it. I just looked into it. Like, I knew it wasn't easy, but when I just explored it, it's like, wow, there's a lot involved. It's like a lot more than I could ever. I knew it wasn't easy, but I thought, wow, this is a lot of stuff to do. So it's a lot of work to put an anthology together.
It's 100%. It's a lot of work, but I think the best thing that you can do is get a really good team behind you. So, I mean, we had our core production team working, but even within like the general group of authors, we had everybody was chipping in with different things. So some people were producing things for Kickstarter rewards for us. So doing things like narration, and we had people doing video work for us and going out and doing promos. So I think if you've got a really good solid team behind you, you definitely find that the work doesn't lessen, but it's definitely more enjoyable, and a lot of the time it doesn't feel so much like work.
Nice. Zamil, how long did it take you to write your story? And were you surprised with the different format with writing a short story versus a longer form?
Yeah, I think short stories are, in a way, more challenging because you have to end them fairly quickly. And so, like with a novel, you can just write as much as you want until you get to the ending. But we had like a word, it was 10,000 words, right? We had like a strict sort of limit, like don't go past 10,000 words. Um, and, you know, so that I think is the most challenging part because you can just start writing your story and just keep going. And then, I have to end it like within 1,000 words now. So I did have to rewrite the ending a few times. That was definitely the hardest bit to get right. But it's a lot of fun. I've written horror short stories before, and I think they're just so fun because they're not really like with fantasy. Fantasy is all about achieving these huge moments of storytelling and these epic like feats and stuff. But horror is really just about one thing. It's about creeping out the reader. So you can creep the reader out in a subtle way, or you can do it in a more like obvious way. So, but the end result is the same. You got to creep the reader out, right? So, and from the stories I read in this anthology, everyone went about it in really interesting ways, and there's a lot of variety in how they went about it. So yeah, it was just a ton of fun, and it took me a while, I think, to it took me over a few weeks to really get it right.
Was it the same for you, Tim? The short story format?
Well, I've been playing around with the short story format for a couple of years. So when I first started creatively writing, it was novels. I thought, why start with a short story when you can write a longer one? And it was as dumb as that. But I just felt novels were where it was at. That's what people read generally. So that's the format I started using first, and I didn't find it very easy. And I think looking back, I would have been better honing some of my skills with short stories, because when I started doing that a couple of years ago, I found it really helpful as like a bit of a mental reset. So I've actually incorporated that now very much into my writing routine. So I'm working on novels and still will always do that. But at certain key points, I'll have a break and I'll write a short story, which I tend to use those as I give them out as part of my newsletter. So they're kind of like they're a bit of a promotional thing, but they're also very much a mere writing and creative aid as well. So yeah, I kind of felt. I think for some of the contributors, they hadn't written short fiction before, so not like me and Zamil, where maybe we're using it more regularly, and they found that whole thing of 10,000 words quite hard. I found it easy to write once I knew what I was writing. I found the most difficult bit for me was, what am I going to do with ears? So as soon as I'd figured that out, that the story came actually really quickly, I was quite pleased about that. But I think it's partly down to that practice of all the pacing is very different over 5,000 words or 10,000 words. It's a totally different exercise, but it really makes you focus on what matters to tell a story. And like Zamil was saying, what effect am I trying to go for? So obviously I'm trying to go for creeping people out and giving them that sort of feeling of unease that horror has, that sort of unsettling feeling. So I think so. I knew how to write a short story, but knowing how to write a horror one was that was slightly more challenging. Just sort of figuring out how to get that tone right. I think I got there in the end, but I really like short fiction, I've got to say. In some ways, it's my favourite form of writing now, and I wouldn't have said that if you'd asked me that, say, 3 or 4 years ago.
What about you, Holly?
Well, for this particular one, I cheated. So, I actually used a story that I had already written quite a while ago. I'm a big believer in that, quite often you'll write something and you don't quite know what it's for at the time, but then at some point you'll figure out, oh, okay, well, this story actually belongs here, or I can repurpose it for this. So I keep everything, even if it's terrible, I keep everything. Most of it's probably terrible, but in terms of actually writing short stories, I do struggle a little bit with them. I do write short stories. I try and keep a hand in that sort of writing style just to keep myself in the practice. If I am writing short stories, I tend to lean more towards horror anyway. So I just find it's a genre that lends itself really nicely to that short, sharp impact type of story. I definitely struggle with fantasy in a short story. I find that really difficult because fantasy is a lot of world building and it's a lot of gradual build up. So to encapsulate that in kind of 10,000 words is something I do struggle with. But I've written a couple of like gothic shorts. I find like the gothic style works really well for short stories. I think it's just one of those things that whether you love them or you hate them, I think the more you do them, the better it is for you as a writer. And I think you pick up a lot of skills from it that you probably wouldn't necessarily pick up doing a longer novel.
I would imagine you probably write something that you feel is terrible, and then you come back to it later, and it ends up being something great. So I think it's good to keep. I would imagine it's good to keep things around that you're not crazy about, because you can come back later, or at least pick the bones off and find something to inspire you later.
I mean, I don't know if the guys will agree with me, but I think part of being an author is that constant pendulum swinging of, looking what you're done and thinking, oh, this is absolute trash fire, and then a day later going, I'm a genius.
Yes, I can confirm that is the normal author experience. I don't know whether Zamil would agree on that one, but yeah, I'm very much, the same words, different day, different reaction.
It's very disorienting. It's nauseating actually, because the swings are very real, and it's like you don't know what the reality is. So it's like it's a uniquely. It's uniquely an author experience that is like just probably one of the more difficult things you have to overcome as an author.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to say, I think that was, again, going back to the point I think I made earlier on, the 12 was working together. It did help that side. I felt I was more confident with my story, putting it out there, because a few people had beta read it and said it wasn't a heap of trash that should be burned immediately. So yeah, I think working together collectively, I think I definitely would like to do. I definitely want to do it again and will do it again, because it's novels are where I want to be at. That's kind of my love of the craft is where it sits. That's the form I prefer the most. But doing these other kind of ways to be creative, it kind of fills the well. And again, it just makes you, I think, a bit more resilient actually to some, that pendulum Zamil was describing. It's awful actually at times. It can be really debilitating as a writer to get creative and get output out there. But I found with this one, I was more on a high than I was in the low stages of that sort of development, really.
So you didn't think when you started this earlier, Steve, that this was going to turn into an author therapy session?
It usually does. For all of us.
I'm here for it. I don't mind.
Yeah. For any of your stories, speaking of like taking old ideas you've had previously, did anything that you've written before, kind of find a place in your short story in this anthology?
I've written like a lot of these short stories for No Sleep. So No Sleep is a Reddit forum where you write in the first person, and you write the stories as if they are happening to you, and everyone sort of role plays along, and you're not supposed to break that immersion. It's supposed to sound true. So that's how I actually started this short story. I started it with that intention in mind, like, okay, I'm gonna write this from first person as if it actually happened to me, and it's gonna start sort of like in exactly in that way, like, okay, I'm making a post online and like telling what happened to me basically. So that sort of, I feel like that approach helped, because it just like if you're telling a story online, you're not too worried about how you're telling the story, like in terms of like, are you being literary, are you like choosing the perfect words. No, you're just putting the story down, and you just want people to understand what happened to you. So that approach, I took it from the days when I wrote for No Sleep, but it helped me to just like get the story down.
Yeah, I was complete opposite of what Zamel's just described because I didn't set it in any. It was a completely new world for me to actually tell this story because I wanted to push it into a couple of people kind of went modern day, which was absolutely fine. My sort of stuff tends to be, your I suppose I'm best known for that sort of Viking fantasy, that kind of era, and I couldn't feel my way into writing horror in that timeline. I know some people do. Lee Conley's very good at it, for example, but I just couldn't come up with the ideas. So I pushed it forward in time. And it meant I needed a new world with just like different technology. So I went 1800s feel. So I was effectively my first foray into gas lamp territory in that respect. So yeah, there was nothing. I had nothing, nothing lying around that I could just repurpose for this whatsoever. I had to basically create a new world, new characters, new magic system. And a couple of authors have done this, and I thought, crikey, I'm doing all this for 10,000 words. But it was quite refreshing to do something different. That way, and again, stretch the sort of writing muscles a bit, really. And I think I like that world I've created now. I like it, and I do feel like there's a novel in there. I think there's something I can take those ideas and run with it. Another reason why I did this was just to stir things up a little bit. But yeah, so for me it was completely new and had to do that world building a bit like the Wallace and Gromit cartoon where the railway tracks sort of having to be built in front of him all the time as he goes round on the train because you need just enough to tell the story, but no more to weigh it down because obviously you've only got that limited number of words to play with. But yeah, I really enjoyed that side, actually creating something completely new and then really thinking there's potential for more here as well.
Wow, so we may see a gas lamp novel, huh?
Yep, that's
Wow.
right.
That's cool. It's exciting. And Holly, I think you had mentioned about, fantasy short stories that they're hard to write because you have all this world building and things you have to build around it. Is that why we don't have more anthologies for fantasy? Because there is so much world building that you have to have, or can you just say like, this is Gaslamp or this is Viking or this is something and just write a story in it? Because we don't have very many fantasy collections, short story collections.
I think it's sort of a two-pronged thing, really. I think that it's, I mean, as we've discussed, it's an awful lot of work to put an anthology together. And I think we got really lucky with the group that we got. The communication between all the authors and between Sarah Chorn, who did our editing, and it was all very smooth. And, if there was an issue, usually it would be resolved within like an hour or two. Someone would say, hey, I'm stuck on this. Can I have a bit of help with it? Or can someone read this? Whereas I think I've known other groups where just the process of writing the stories can drag on and on for, a year, if not more. So I think there is that element of it. You do need to have a lot of organisation. You do need to have a really strong leadership. But at the same time, I also think it's that there are actually a lot of anthologies out there and are being made, but they're just maybe not being picked up or not being noticed. I think this is going to be, by the end of this year, I'll have done either 3 or 4 anthologies over the last 18 months to 2 years. So I did Skybreaker with Lee C. Connolly and Jay Hannaford and a couple of others. There's another one coming up, which I think Tim will confirm. The Kickstarter is now fully funded for the advent of winter. That's going to be in progress soon. I know you yourself are looking at putting together an anthology. So, they are out there. I think it's just getting those eyes on them and getting the audience to see that they're there and that they're available.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of work. Like I said, I've talked to kind of felt a little silly because I've talked to so many authors about short stories and anthologies, and then thought, well, I know there's a lot of work, but let me look into it. And I was like, wow, there's a lot more than I anticipated. There's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of moving parts because you're dealing not only just with it's not just you, it's you're in a team almost that you have other people with different responsibilities, and you have to count on people and give that some of that control over. And was that weird for anyone to kind of, because you're so used to writing your own things, and of course you have an editor and you have feedback, but when they're involved in the day-to-day, was that weird for any of you to have a team involved in decision making like that?
But not for me, because I definitely have a team that I work with. We call ourselves Team Vanguard. So I'm very much used to working with that dynamic. So for me, it kind of felt very comfortable. But, obviously, for some people, it was their first time working with an editor. It was their first time collaborating. So, yeah, I think it was an interesting experience for a lot of people in a good way.
Yeah, I think that the control point's interesting because it was very supportive. Don't get me wrong; it was very supportive. Still is a very supportive group, and it's been great getting to know people and so on. But again, I'm a one man band author, so like Holly was describing, being edited for the first time, which was really helpful, but also it's a really interesting. It's quite a choppy experience when someone's dicing up your words and all the rest of it. If I'd been doing this on my own, I'd have simply banged it out, and that would have been done. So that there are differences of production and how things came to be. That again, I think some people were just more experienced at than others. I think probably the editing process was the most difficult bit actually. After that, it was it was a good experience. But yeah, it's just a very different process. Completely different process. And a lot of us all cut our teeth just independently producing our own thing, very much being used to doing it our own way. I think one of the reasons why this thing worked quite well was actually, yeah, we had to give up some control in terms of production and artwork and editing and all those sort of things. But at the same time, we got a lot of latitude in the stories. So I don't like those sort of things where you get 5 prompts and you've got to include an elephant, a teacup, a giraffe, and a ladder, and some other random a hedgehog. And that creates things out of that. I find I immediately freeze creatively when I've got prompts. I find them really hard to use. So I think the masterstroke here actually was with the brief Holly set was actually giving us, there's a theme, but there was loads of ways in which it got interpreted, and I think that really made everyone's voice come out really clearly. So you can tell, when you read Zamil's work, it's Zamil, you know what I mean? But I think similarly with mine, we were able to keep our voice and concentrate on the story we want to tell rather than trying to hit certain points, which they can feel a little bit arbitrary. They can feel a bit crowbarred in sometimes. I think once they have the creative freedom, I think that won it over for me, really.
What about you, Zamil?
Yeah, it felt pretty similar to my usual process because I wrote the story, then we had some beta reading by fellow authors. So at that point, after the beta reading stage, you have a better idea of what you need to fix and what the problems are in the story. So then, I went in and I tried to fix as much as I could, and then I went to the editor, and but by the time it went to the editor, it was already in like a really good shape. So there wasn't too much feedback at that stage. And it's for me, I always like to have like this sort of collaborative process. Like even with my novels, I send it out to like 20 people to beta read, and maybe only like 7 or 8 will actually do it, but I try to get as much input as I can. So it felt very similar, and I think it was a really good process to go with, because you do need those layers of sort of feedback, and it definitely helped, I think it helped make all the stories like a lot stronger.
I've just realised I'm a control freak listening to that. 20 beta readers for a novel. I'm going out in hives over here in the UK. That's I think that's really. I'm debating actually whether to use one for my next novel when it comes out, because I feel like I'm trying to hit so many marks. I'm not sure whether I'm objective enough at whether I'm hitting them or not. So I'm actually thinking about using that process for the first time. But yeah, actually quite difficult for me to think giving something less finished to your audience and seeing what they make of it. I imagine though people enjoy beta reading, otherwise they wouldn't do it again, Zamil. But it's presumably that they see that as a bonus rather than a negative.
Yeah, I even have alpha readers. So forget about beta readers. I have alpha readers who read what I've written without me even looking at it or editing it even a little bit. So, all these layers sort of help.
It's a horror story. It's
yeah.
Unedited. I'm just reeling from that. Just wang it straight out.
Yeah, I mean, I
Wow.
think for alpha reading, it needs to be people you know and trust, like not just randoms, right? So, like my alpha readers are like my friends, basically. So they
Right.
know not to go too hard and be too brutal, but they'll tell me what's wrong, and what I need to fix. So it's it works for me.
Do do beta readers come
I'm
in?
making notes whilst
Yeah,
having a
I
clean
think
me.
Tim's about to needs an ambulance. For for beta reading, do they come in before or after an edit?
I think typically they come in after like an initial edit,
Hmm.
so probably second draft is a good time to get beta readers in there, but not. But it should be before your editor actually takes a look.
Hmm. Tim, you should the look on your face.
He's just processing.
Yeah, I've just discovered I've discovered there's this facet to my personality that I'd never really recognised until this recording. So it's, I mean, Holly, you sort of do beta reading and put stuff out to people, don't you? I think I'm the anomaly here. I am the problem at the end of the day.
I think my process is similar. It's probably a little bit different in that I tend to go to beta readers after my editor's taken a look, but my editor is also a friend of mine, so she tends to look quite early in the process anyway.
Hmm.
And it may still yet go back to her a few times to do like developmental tweaks and things like that. So, but yeah, I do have like a core team. I mean, I don't have 20, I have about 8 people that I go out to quite regularly who do beta for me, and come back with various feedback. It's very useful, very good way to see where you kind of, plot holes or where there's any things that you might not have considered. If you've got somebody that's suddenly going across the entire breadth of a town in like 10 minutes or something and you haven't noticed, they're very good for pointing those things out.
Oh, nice. And I think I've talked to all of you before one of your books was released, and we've talked about nerves and the anticipation, the anxiety that goes into the whole process of having release day come and getting ready for it and getting kind of it being out in the wild. Was this experience different for all of you because you're in a team, because it's a collective? Was it different? Was there a different type of feeling getting ready for the books to ship?
I think I still feel nervous. I don't know who's read my story, and I still feel nervous at the thought of my story being read and what people will think about it, because it's still my story. It's still got my name on it, and it's always like nerve wracking for me whenever I release a book or whenever I release anything, how it's going to be received. That has never changed, because I mean, even if your like beta readers like it and your friends like it and your editor likes it, there's still a very small sample of people. So when it's out in the wider world, you're always going to get unexpected feedback. That's something I've realized, and both in the positive and negative direction. So, it is always kind of nervy, and that's just how it is.
I do think that with doing something like this with an anthology, there's still the nerves there and there's still the apprehension, but I think there's a bit of comfort to be found in the fact that there are so many different stories and different voices. So if I put a novel out and somebody doesn't like it, they just don't like the way that I write, which is it's fine. And there's always going to be people who don't like the way you write, but that's it. They don't like the book then. Whereas with an anthology, inevitably you're going to have people who like certain stories better than others and who are going to find authors that they kind of connect with more than maybe somebody else. So it's nice that there is that diversity in it, that means people have got more choice and more freedom to decide, oh well, I like this, or that bit wasn't for me. We want them to love all of it, obviously, but I think it's nice to know that if they didn't like my story, for example, which of course they would, why wouldn't they, but if they didn't, that they might like Lee's or they might like Trudy's, and there's going to be something there for lots of different people.
Yeah, I think that I feel more confident just because it's been of the Kickstarter funding it, so I know there's a readership straight away. So that's when I first started out, I released my book and went ta-da, and then no one bought it. So I've had that experience because I thought marketing, what's that? You do that months after, surely, once the initial clamour of fanfare has died down, and it turns out your fanfare's your mum. So this one feels a lot more. It feels like it has more prominence, and I feel a bit more confident. You're right. You still got that. Will people like my story? Will they like? There's that obvious that nerves, but I think it's diluted actually in my view by having the 12 of us kind of there. It's not such a big deal if they don't click with my writing, but I'd love it if they enjoyed other people's and went with that. And I think it's a great way to find your next read. Actually, it's certainly from my point of view. I've sort of had interactions with all the people involved in this particular project, but I've not read all their books. This is the first time I've been able to read everyone's writing and get a decent sample of it, because I was also on the proofreading team at the end, just getting those final line edits done for getting the book out and formatted. So it gave me a chance to read them quite a lot actually, which was its own horror story in some respects. But yeah, I think it's, where am I going with this? I suppose I think the stories are great across the board. They're not necessarily going to be for everyone's taste, but the quality level's right up there. And I think we stand or fall together a little bit on this, but I think predominantly it'll be more upwards trajectory, I guess. So I'm feeling reasonably confident. I suppose what I'm worried about now is the Kickstarter launch is its own thing, and I'd love that to translate now into actually people picking up the anthology when it goes on general release next month, which is the 16th of November, which is a really important date everyone should make a note of in their calendars. So, that I think for me is a little bit of nerves around, will it get that good reaction when it actually goes on general sale as well? Because I'd love it if it did.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask you, because we do have the release date on November 16th, 2023. There is available an ebook. Will there be a physical option for people who missed the Kickstarter later, or is just Kickstarter backers?
So physical books have gone out early to people, and they've come out as an exclusive. You get an exclusive cover as a Kickstarter backer, basically. But then we flip to the red cover that I'm modelling on this on this T-shirt. We've flipped to that for the actual general release. So, and that'll be both paperback and ebook as well. And there will be an audio book as well, which I should mention too. So RJ Bailey is busy recording that. I think, Holly, you're kind of more in touch with him on that side, aren't you? But he's busy working on that. So I suspect that'll probably be early 2024, but I don't know if you know any better, Holly?
If we are lucky and everything goes to plan, it may be a little bit before that. It is currently quite a significant way through the production, so I think it's just waiting on RJ, really.
Wow, cool. So yes, I know people will ask if they miss the Kickstarter, they'll be able to get a physical copy of it later, so that's good. Yeah. I know it's premature to ask, but will there be a volume 2? I know it's early. I know you're just finishing this one up, but I have to. I know. Yeah.
Just hang on. It's, I think never say never with these things, but this has been a lot. I think it's been a lot. I personally would like to enjoy the book being released, being out, being bought, but I suspect I will get myself involved in something like this further down the line. But I think running it and running the Kickstarter and those kind of things, it's its own challenge actually, and it's meant other projects have had to go on hold for me. So I think when the time's right, absolutely. But whether it's the Anatomy of Fear or something totally different, I wouldn't like to say right now.
Yeah.
It's been a positive experience. I must stress that it has been positive, but also a lot of work.
Yeah, I think Tim hit the nail on the head there a little bit, where he said about you do something like this and it's a great positive experience, but it does take up so much of your time, and for me it's been almost like having a second full-time job. So all of my own projects, my own books, my own writing have really been on a back burner for the past year and a half. So I think now that it's winding down and we're getting close to the general release. Obviously I said earlier that I've been working on something else. My attention is definitely focused now more on getting back to the projects that I've been ignoring for the past year. But in the future, I love doing things like this, and I always say I'm never going to do it. I get to the end, I'm like, I'm never going to do this again, and then within 6 months, someone will come up to me and have an idea or suggest something, and I'll go, yeah, and then it'll just start all over again, and I love it really. I can't stop myself. It's like an addiction.
I had to ask because you know that there's readers out there like me who are like, I want more, and they're gonna. I haven't even read it yet. I'm already hoping there's a volume 2. So,
Well,
I had to ask.
the funny thing is, when we actually initially went out to the 12 authors, we actually had a list of about 25 authors. So there was like not that they were a second choice, but just we kind of went through the list in order, and it just so happened the first 12 all said yes straight away. But we did have kind of this list of like, oh, okay, well, if so-and-so can't do it, we'll go to this person. So, I'm not saying that I'm going to do it, but I am saying if anyone else wants to, there is a list of authors available.
I think it's worth making the point that there are fewer body parts available, though. So they do need, but I'm sure there's still plenty left of some description. But this needs some thought, Steve. You can't just throw this idea out there and just expect us to run with it without some serious consideration.
I think I've almost given Tim a heart attack like 2 or 3 times already on this recording. So yeah, no, I had to ask, but I know we're just at the finish line, so I know that you're just wrapping this one up, and it's a long process. So I can understand it being just like, let us get through this, don't bother us yet, kind of thing. For each of you, what was your biggest takeaway now that you've completed, now that the book is being shipped? It could be personal, professional, anything at all. What's the biggest takeaway for each of you that you've taken away from this experience? Everybody's rubbing their chins.
It was my first horror story I'd written in a few years. So what I realized was that I missed writing horror, and there's something about horror that is not captured when you're writing fantasy. Even though my fantasy does veer toward horror and incorporates a lot of horror elements, but pure horror is just it's a different kind of fun, and it's a different mindset. So I started thinking like, do I want to write like a pure horror novel even, or maybe a novella or something, or do I want to veer even more toward horror, like to really in the horror spectrum of horror fantasy, basically. So that was sort of something that this project like really made me reflect about.
I was just going to comment. I think I'd sort of kind of semi-answered that one before, but I think for me it just opened the door to a whole new world. So I suppose if I'm going to build a novel onto that, it's going to be actually a bit like someone just mentioned, sort of writing something different. It would be writing, I suppose, pure, fantasy horror, if it can be pure, if it's 2 different things mixed together. But it's, I think that was the big takeaway for me, that I came out of it with bursting with ideas of things I could use that perhaps, whereas before I'd felt not constrained by what I was writing. I'm really enjoying that world and finishing the stuff off in there. But it's great to know there's something else next. There's that fear as an author. The authors are full of fear, by the way. I don't know why we just do call it author's terror or something as the title of this book. Will I run out of ideas was one of my early fears as a writer, and I found actually my problem now is, will I live long enough to write all of my ideas down before something happens to me? And this is one of those examples where I now really want to write this new novel, but I know I've got to knuckle down and do some other things first. But it also means that I'm confident that when I get to something new, I've got a new project, waiting on the blocks, ready and raring to go. So, quite enthused by that, actually.
Yeah, I think at the risk of sounding kind of cheesy and emotional about things, because I feel like we've gone down the this is now therapy route. I think the biggest takeaway that I took from it was just how much response there is and how much support there is within not just the readers and the kind of the audience, but also within the writing community itself and the indie community. not only did we have support within the group itself of authors, but, you know, we had people reaching out to us. You know, I think some of the authors were talking to Dirk Ashton about Kickstarters, and, you know, we spoke to Zach Argyle and, you know, lots of other people. I can't even remember everyone's name, but there was so much response in terms of giving us advice and giving us support and getting it out there, and not just with the Kickstarter, but throughout the whole project. And for me, certainly there were times when I did feel like, oh, this is a huge project. I'm getting sunk in this and I don't know what I'm doing. And, you know, people in the group came out and they took on extra responsibilities, and it's amazing how much of a community there is. And I mean, I recently went to the BristolCon convention. I was there with a couple of the other authors from the anthology. My husband came with me, and he actually said, you know, you always talk about the writer community. He said, but I didn't realise that it really is a community, you know, and it really is people connecting and sharing things and helping each other out and lifting each other up. So for me, this whole process was really about getting to see that at a really kind of deep and very cathartic level as well. So that's the end of my therapy for today. So
I'm a lot cheaper than a therapist, so, you know, it's okay. So you've all mentioned, you know, your own project had to be kind of put on hold and, you know, kind of be waiting in the wings while you work on this one. What are all of you working on now, and what are you looking forward to doing next?
I have a Gunmetal Gods Kickstarter, so that's taking up a lot of my time, as well as the fourth book in the Gunmetal Gods saga, fourth and final book. So these are the two things that are like absorbing all my time right now. I've also been working on other horror short stories, like you know, sort of similar to what Tim was mentioning, like fantasy horror, and trying to see if you know, these are sort of just experimental things, and trying to see like you know, it's a very challenging sort of mix of genres, but I'm trying to see if there's some, like, there's a novel in there somewhere. So yeah, that's you know, it's a very, like, my plate is very full. So yeah, that's how it is these days.
Yeah, so what am I working on? So I've got, having said never do an anthology ever again, I am doing another anthology, but I'm very much a contributor rather than in the driving seat with this one. So The Advent of Winter, which is a 24 authors writing on the theme of basic winter fantasy theme, essentially. So that's currently got on the Kickstarter journey right now. It's hit its target, which is obviously absolutely fantastic, and that's going to be released to... it's a slightly strange project, this one. It's going to be released as an advent calendar in book form. So work with me on this. But if you're a Kickstarter supporter, you'll basically get delivered to you each day of Advent. So 1st through to 24th of December, one of the 24 short stories will get delivered to you. So you get to a short story a day as part of as your reward, and then it's need to be packaged up and put out to release subsequently. So Kickstarter supporters get either an ebook version of that assembled together, or they get a physical. That we're doing a hardback book as a release as the main sort of physical reward, and then we're planning to go on to general release next year with that project as well. So yeah, I've sort of contributed to that. So that'll be effectively my next release. So November for The Anatomy of Fear, and then December for The Advent of Winter. I've got a couple of things coming up pretty fast on the blocks. In terms of more personal direct projects, I'm working on the Brotherhood of the Eagle fantasy series. So again, like Zamil, fourth and final book in that series is taking shape. I've had to pause it for a while for a couple of reasons, but it's definitely going to come out, as the series is definitely going to conclude next year. So I'm looking forward to getting back into that. And I again feel very energized on that project right now. It was a little bit, writing a bit of a slog, and you know, you can go through these phases where it's not necessarily clicking or working, and again, doing something different is a really good tonic for coming back fresh to something. So yeah, got back into the driving seat with that, and I can see how that novel is going to end now. So I'm quite excited to sort of know where the series is going, knowing how it's all going to finish. Just a small matter of writing the novel. So I'm sort of on with that about halfway through now, probably more like 2/3 actually. Wow. So that'll be the next big release in 2024. Will be Broken Brotherhood, which is the fourth and final book in that series.
Wow. When did it click for you what the end would be on the fourth book?
So probably only about 3 or 4 months ago. So I've done that really weird. I've never done this before. I've written the ending. So I've never felt the need to do that before. So I've wrote books 1, 2, and 3 kind of very much sequentially, just throwing ideas at it. And then I realised that my plot lines were sort of just kind of going crazy, and I needed to rein them back in. So I found it really helpful to write the final chapter and know what I was trying to do, knowing the fate of some of the principal characters, and then what I was working to. And as soon as I did that, it unlocked the second half or the final third of the book. It has now sort of come together as a result of doing that. So probably I probably know the fate now of the central characters. Probably that kind of came about earlier on in the summer. It's just a case of writing what will happen to them.
What about you, Zamil? Did you know how it was going to end, or did you write the last chapter before you started?
No. I do not know how it's going to end.
Oh.
Well, I mean, I have a vague idea, but I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I'm facing. Is how do you like end something that has been going on for so long? How do you do it in a satisfying way? How do you tie up all the loose ends? So it's like a very big, probably the biggest challenge I've had as a writer so far.
I'll just second that. This is the hardest thing I've ever written. Forget this anthology and all the stuff we've just been talking about. From that, trying to bring a 4-book series to conclusion it's a different challenge completely from just growing the story organically every book. So yeah, I should have thought about that a lot earlier than I actually did.
And Zamil, when can we expect the fourth book? When do you think we may get our mitts on it?
Yeah, Q2 next year. So probably summer next year. Yeah, that's my hope.
And Holly, you said you're working on you're getting your cover designed and you're putting some finishing touches in your project. When can we expect that, and what else are you working on?
So at the moment, I'm actually also, as Tim mentioned, a part of the Advent of Winter anthology. So the story is written. It's like 99.9% there. It's just at the stage of just doing the last final tweaks and things. I'm also working on a standalone. It's currently a standalone story, which hopefully will be out early next year. I haven't set any dates yet because at the moment it is with the editor, so we're just working through that now. The cover's being designed. It's late stages, but it's still too early to really put anything out there that's too concrete. But I'm really excited. It's a brand new world, it's a brand new story, but for anyone that read the Skybreaker anthology that I mentioned earlier, I've actually taken the character that I created for that story and I've put them into this new world. So it's been quite fun, and for people who read Skybreaker, there's a few little nods to that story in the novel, and it's been fun to try and tie those two things together but without making them in the same world. So that was a lot of fun. And what else have I got going on? I feel like I've got a lot. I feel like there's something else really important that I should be doing that people keep mentioning to me all the time. But oh yes, book 3.
Well, am I allowed to mention Vanguard here? Is that not to be mentioned?
No, it's in the works. I mean, there's a book there at the moment. It's not anywhere near done. The story, I know what's happening. There's like a plot plan. It's just trying to finesse it and get it to be the book that I want it to be. So, at the moment it's a book. It's not the book yet. But we'll get there.
Nice. So one last question for each of you. If you could have chosen any body part, if there is a volume 2, let's just pretend there's a volume 2, which body part would you choose if you had free reign to choose any body part you wanted, internal, external, any body part? What would you choose and why?
That's a good one.
I'll go. The creeping death of dandruff. I feel maybe I'm now a good enough writer to bring that off. So yeah, if there is a volume 2, that's what you're getting. And just remember, Steve, you asked for it.
I mean, just off the top of my head, I feel like I probably wouldn't move a million miles away from where I was already. So I did neck. So I feel like I could maybe do something with like tonsils, because I feel like that kind of being unable to speak or to scream out if, you know, something is happening is a pretty scary idea. So I could probably make something out of that.
I would say I had ideas for like eyes and ears, but I would go with ears. I think like stories that play around with hearing, and you know, that sort of thing could be really fun. So yeah, ears.
What would you choose, Steve? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. It'd be a tough one because just hearing all of you talk, I was just thinking maybe teeth. I think you could do some creepy things with teeth. You had mentioned tonsils. Tonsils would be really, because tonsils are weird anyway, right? So I think you could do some strange things with teeth because we depend on them so much, and they're, you know, important to us. But I think you could do some cool things with teeth. Yeah.
We're all just thinking now. It's like the imagination's running riot.
Feel free to, I'm looking forward to the teeth story by one of you. But yeah, I think you could do some cool things with teeth.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, so I know it's the time gets away from. I know it's getting late for all of you, but I really want to thank all of you. It's great to see all of you again and to chat and to see everyone. But in the meantime, Tim, can you tell us where people can find you and your work?
Yeah, I've kept it pretty simple. So if you Google or look for Tim Hardie Author, you'll usually find me. So I've got a website, that's timhardieauthor.co.uk, with all my social media links in there. So that's probably the best place to go.
And Holly.
Yeah. Before I start, I just want to check something, because I mean, I know this is audio, but I'm quite aware there's a little photo of me in the corner of my screen. I'm just wondering, is that what you guys can see, or do you just see a blank screen?
Just a blank screen.
Okay, I mean, that instantly has made me feel relieved, because I'm just looking at this photo and thinking, you know, that's... My screen froze at an inopportune moment when my face is kind of doing this weird thing, and I was like, that's just a horror story in itself. So I just wanted to check that. I've been very impressed if you'd sat looking at that for the past hour, but... In terms of where people can find me, sorry, going off track. I'm on Twitter. Twitter handle is @Holly Tinsley, and the... E in Tinsley is a 3. I'm also on Facebook. I do have a WordPress writer website, which I am at some point going to update, I promise. I've been saying this for a year. But otherwise, generally, social media is the best place to find me.
And Zamil.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. So my handle is @Zamil Akhtar, basically on all of them. So you can find me there. My books are available on Amazon. And I do have a website, zamilakhtar.com. Yeah, that's how you can find me.
Nice. I would imagine having a website would be very important now with all the madness around platforms. I think it's important to have that kind of home base, you know, just in case things hit the fan. So it's great to see that. But thanks all of you again. I really appreciate your time. And it's great. Like I said, it's great to talk to all of you again. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's good to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great.
We'll talk very soon.